Welcome to Mamahood After Trauma, where healing and mamahood intersect. I'm Emily, your host. Join us as we discover practical strategies to nurture ourselves with kindness and understanding. Stay tuned for insights and inspiration to support you on your path of healing and growth. Let's dive in together. This is Mamahood After Trauma. Hello, Mama, and welcome to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. I am so excited that you have taken some time out of your busy day to tune in and listen to this episode. This episode is going to be a little bit different because it's coming from the perspective of a spouse married to a trauma survivor. And this is often something that we don't think about as trauma survivors. What does our spouse want us to know? Well, today's guest, Danielle Sebastian, is the right person to talk about this because she is passionate about advocating for partners who are navigating the complexities of relationships impacted by past trauma. As a best-selling author, speaker, and coach, Danielle draws from her own profound journey of overcoming the challenges of being married to a trauma survivor. Her compelling story and practical insights inspire hope, provide essential tools for those striving to create deeper, more meaningful connections. In this talk, Danielle focuses on mothers who have survived childhood trauma and are now navigating the complexities of connecting with their partner. She discusses the reality of carrying past trauma into relationships and steps to take to heal and build deeper connections. And, who doesn't want deeper connections? So grab a notebook because Danielle drops some powerful nuggets of information, and enjoy this replay from the Mamahood After Trauma Symposium.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on what your partner wishes you knew. 3 keys to help them understand you better. The other day, I was having some lunch with some friends, and we were having a funny conversation about what our favorite movie was. And I actually thought about the movie Titanic as being the one that had impacted me the most. I realized at the time that I was dating someone that just did not give me the feeling that Jack and Rose had in the movie. So call me crazy, but that movie really helped me sift through my relationships and ultimately led me to meet the man of my dreams, the Jack to my Rose, who I married on a stunning beach in Kauai. But I have to be honest with you, the honeymoon really didn't last very long. It wasn't long before I started to notice several things that just weren't quite right. It seemed like we were lost in an emotional minefield, trying everything to manage it and still not seeing results. Things that other cripples could work through caused so much conflict that lasted for days, and it was just this cycle of dysfunction that seemed to be getting worse over time. So while at first my marriage was funny and sweet, beautiful and romantic, just like in the movies, soon it became more of a storm that seemed to be brewing. And it was really at this point when I threw my hands up, not knowing what else to do. I ended up leaving my wedding ring on the kitchen table and calling it quits. It was only at that point, when things were at their worst, that my husband was able to reveal to me for the first time a terrible history of childhood abuse that he suffered at the hands of the church. This was definitely not the Jack and Rose love story that I had imagined. And working through past trauma was not really what I had in mind when I told him I wanted more adventure in my life. But this is marriage. And here's the truth. When I was finally able to uncover this piece of the puzzle that I just didn't feel like I could put my finger on, there was a lot of relief in me. And I thought, all right, we've got this. A few counseling sessions, a little guidance, and in about 6 months or so, we'll be on track. Now, I know that to trauma survivors, that sounds entirely naive. And I know what you're thinking. But I do want you to know that for some of us who haven't lived that kind of history, a lot of us are just really in the dark. We have no frame of reference and no way of understanding all these things that lay underneath this. Now, I've come to understand after 10 years since my husband was able to reveal his history that trauma healing in a relationship isn't a quick project with an end date. Rather, it's a journey and one that requires patience, commitment, and a willingness to grow together. I learned that some of the survival skills my husband developed to protect himself as a child were something that I needed to understand better. And that is why I am here today to help partners and survivors understand each other better and have a closer relationship. When I really started delving into trauma, history, and relationships, I found out that my story was not unique. Not surprisingly, to those of us who are in this realm, relationships with those who have a history of childhood abuse are often in crisis. A study conducted in the year 2000 examined 96 couples. At least one of them reported a history of childhood abuse. And the study found that couples with a history of childhood abuse were more likely to experience lower relationship satisfaction, have higher individual stress symptoms than couples without an abuse history. Additionally, couples with a history of childhood abuse scored lower on cohesion, indicating that emotional bonds between the spouses may be weaker in such marriages. And this study really highlights the impact of childhood trauma on relationships and the need to address these and heal those resulting potential issues that you may be seeing. Now, I am on a mission to help couples with a trauma history understand each other and to be closer. So the reason I am speaking to you today is because I care deeply about this work. And I'm not saying that every partner felt like I did, but I walked through confusion, isolation, a lot of trial and error, trying to understand my husband's trauma and how it shaped our relationship. And now I want to bridge that gap between trauma survivors and their partners, because there are things that we wish we could tell you, things that could make a real difference. Now, my husband and I have now been married for 14 years, and we are happy. The trauma didn't just disappear, but now we have the tools to face whatever comes our way. And I know firsthand that more peace, more closeness, and happiness is possible even when relationships are impacted by trauma. So it is my heart's desire to come alongside with you, support you, and share tools that transformed my relationships. So thank you so much for being here today, and let's dive in. So childhood trauma survivors, as all of you know, and trauma survivors, just it doesn't have to be in child, often develop coping mechanisms that help them endure difficult situations. But these same strategies can sometimes complicate adult intimate relationships. And this is not an exhaustive list, but here are some of the common coping mechanisms that I saw in my relationship, and I also see in the other partners that I coach and that I have connections with. So emotional withdrawal or avoidance is often a technique that survivors learn to protect themselves by, dissociating or disconnecting from their emotions. But I have found that that can lead to a lot of confusion in relationships with the partner just not understanding what's going on. The hyper independence. A lot of survivors become fiercely self reliant and they only trust themselves, rightfully so. They usually trusted someone who ended up hurting them. And so that lack of trust and the need to be very independent is very understandable. But it definitely is tough when you're in an intimate relationship if you can't rely at least a little bit on each other. People pleasing and over accommodation, childhood trauma survivors, they have often learned to prioritize others' needs to avoid conflict or feel valued. And so this is something that communication can help in a relationship. Distrust and difficulty with intimacy. This is pretty challenging when you're talking about how the partner can understand and how you can work through that together in a relationship. Fear of abandonment can stem from early loss, neglect, or instability. And this fear can actually lead to clinginess, jealousy, wanting, to control where their partner is so that so that the survivor doesn't get hurt. Emotional outbursts of anger. I would say that I see this quite a bit with female partners like me with male. They just seem to have a lot of pent up anger, and when things get too much, they tend to lash out, making the partner feel like they're walking on eggshells. Codependency. Childhood trauma survivors may find themselves drawn to codependent relationships where they feel like they're saving or taking care of these partners. And this can prevent healthy boundaries from occurring and make it difficult for each partner to function independently. This is very common. Self-sabotage, where survivors may either consciously or subconsciously, they could look like they're picking fights or being unfaithful or ending the relationship when things get too good. Hypervigilance. Trauma survivors are often attuned to signs of potential danger everywhere, and they may see it even when it's not there. So I see this play out in relationships when partners may ask things that seem very, very normal to ask, like, can you help me out with the dishes? And their partner feels like they've been personally attacked, that their character is under attack, that they are a terrible person or a terrible partner, because there's just they're anticipating danger with that statement. Difficulty communicating needs is very common. And then low self-worth and seeking validation. Often survivors have a lot of shame, and this can put strain on the relationship, where they need constant reassurance, or struggle with jealousy or insecurity. Addictive behaviors to numb themselves from the pain. And then rigid boundaries or walls or needing to control makes them feel safe, wanting to have control. So that makes them feel safe. All of these are just some examples to get you thinking about if any of these things are happening in your relationship. And they may not, but these are some of the things that I have seen that can cause some relationship issues. So let's get in to what your partner wishes they could tell you that are a few key things that would help them better understand what is going on in your brain, what is going on with you to help them navigate their relationships better. So, first and foremost, I want you to know that we can handle the truth about what happened to you. I want you to hear me if this is you, but many trauma survivors, and maybe you, may fear that if your partner knew your full story, that they would not want to stay. But I want you to listen to me right now, and I want to tell you this is not the case. Partners want trauma survivors to know that they can handle the truth about what happened and that what happened to you is absolutely not your fault. It happened to you. It does not define who you are. Now, we are not expecting you to tell us everything. That is absolutely not the case. But what I would encourage you to do is that by not understanding very much about what happened to you or talking about some of those coping mechanisms that you may have developed, it leads to a lot of mystery and confusion for the partner. And a lot of partners wish that their partner had trusted them with some of that information so they would have a clearer understanding of what's going on in their head. So, knowing the reality, however painful, would help them. And we're going to get to the next one to stop blaming themselves for some of the reactions and behaviors that they're seeing. Partners want trauma survivors to know they're stronger than you think. Even though hearing about the trauma is tough, they would rather know the truth than to be left guessing. All right. The second thing that partners wish that their trauma survivor partner knew was that you don't have to figure out your triggers and you don't have to work through those coping mechanisms that you've developed alone. That identifying them and understanding their impact can be something that you do together with your partner. It's very understandable that you sometimes can't put words to things that set off a trigger. And certain of reactions I know happen without warning. But I think that as a couple, you together can work through when these reactions are happening to put your finger on, okay, clarity and reduce tension, knowing that maybe this was something that didn't have anything to do with the situation, but rather that it was that physical response that occurs when there has been some sort of trigger. I work very closely with partners to start identifying those triggers and working with their partner on that. And I think that this is something that we can help you with, and we wish that we could work on that together more with you. The last thing that I want to give you as something that your partner is not very good at expressing, but that they wish that you knew, is that I can't stress enough to you how much your partner is internalizing the emotions that may be coming their way. It's like withdrawal and defensiveness. Those type of reactions are very difficult, and they feel it deeply, thinking that they're at fault, that they've caused it. And this self-blame can really eat away at a partner's sense of security in a relationship. So it's really crucial for both parties to see these triggers for what they are and separate themselves from it, both of you, so that you can separate yourself from it so that it doesn't feel like it's anyone's fault or that anyone's being made to feel like they're at blame. And from my experience, it doesn't work for trauma survivors to suppress some of the emotions that they're seeing because they will eventually surface, often with heightened intensity, but instead finding healthy ways to express those feelings through, open conversations or journaling or therapy can help those emotions from coming out in a harmful way that may hurt the relationship. So, by creating a safe space for those emotions to be expressed without coming out at the partner in some sort of way, you're going to be building a much stronger foundation where you can both feel understood, supported, and closer than ever. The bottom line is this: communication. Communicate more openly about the trauma helps your partner understand more what's going on, and reassuring them that some of these reactions that they're seeing are personal and that you want to work together towards a path forward. Now, I want you to know that if any of this resonated with you, I have additional resources, particularly for partners, about how trauma affects adult relationships and some ways that you can deal with it. So I highly recommend that you check out my website. Let anybody know who this may resonate with, that there are resources out there for all of you, for partners, in order to have a healthier relationship. I can't thank you enough, and I can't wait to hear your questions.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in to this episode of the Mamahood After Trauma podcast. If you would like more of the Mamahood After Trauma community, make sure to look in the description of this episode for the link to become a Mamahood After Trauma Inner Circle member. Until next time, Mama, keep